Hi, welcome to this video. It's a quick video to give you an overview on the 3 best editions for your Villa-Lobos Etudes. This is all part of the Villa-Lobos 12 and 12 challenge, which is aimed at getting all 12 Etudes done and learned, hopefully, within a year. Right, let's dive in. So, first off, we have this bad boy. This has been around since the 1950s. It's generally the edition most people have. It's complete collected works of Villa-Lobos. Unfortunately, there are tons of issues with this, and if you started learning Villa-Lobos with this, you probably have already encountered some of them, particularly on the end bars of the early Etudes and with missing bars on the later Etudes. So this is a good addition to have as a backup if you can afford it, but currently it is the most expensive edition in this group. Right, so what do you get in this one? Well, you get all the Etudes, all 12 of them. You get the 5 preludes, and you get the Suite Brasiliana and the Choro with that Choro number 1. So it is pretty much most, if not all, of Villa-Lobos's guitar works in a handy edition. Biggest problem with this edition is the lack of fingering. You have just got to have either a good teacher or know what you're doing, or know what Villa-Lobos was doing, especially when it comes to certain fingerings and the harmonics. Villa-Lobos had a particular way of writing his harmonics. So yes, great reference edition, and if you're like me, you bought this years ago when it wasn't as expensive. Currently this is averaging between £40 and £50, so you're looking at $80 to $100. It's quite expensive. Okay, we have a new player on the block for editions, and this is the Frederick Zaganti edition, which was published in 2011. The aim of the publishers was to get a complete collected edition of the 12 Etudes with commentary from all the sources, and there are actually quite a few sources. There were sources that I didn't even realize existed. Prior to this, I only knew of the 1928 manuscript source, but actually there are a couple of other sources, and obviously the Calavaro source. This is worth having, and it's currently the cheapest edition. I think it's averaging between 25 and £30, so $50 to $60. This edition is worth getting first, over and above this edition, unless of course you want to play the Choros or the Suite Brasiliana or the Preludes for the Etudes. For one very simple reason. The publishers and Frederick Zaganti have taken a line where they're going to use the fingering from the 1928 manuscript edition, and they're going to use the aesthetic and general direction from the 1950 published edition. So it's the best of both worlds. On top of which, at the back, they give all the alternatives and the different fingerings and any sort of issues that arise with different bars. They also do a fully written out version of number 10, because number 10 had a big section cut out of it in the 1950s edition, so it's worthwhile checking out. But the main thing is it gives all the sources and it tells you where the variances are. Worth having, cheapest edition, brand new, set out very cleanly, very nice with clear fingerings from Villa-Lobos, and then anything editorial has been made clear. So this is worth getting. So Frederick Zaganti, Hal Leonard edition, worth getting first. Okay, we come to the last one now. This is not an edition so much as a study guide, and if you're into Villa-Lobos and you're into getting a deeper understanding of this, then I would definitely say check out Abel Calavaro's Guitar Masterclass for the 12 Etudes. It's not necessary, and to be quite honest, unless you've had a look at some of Abel Calavaro's other works, particularly his guitar manual, you're going to struggle a little bit with this because the language is quite thick. There's a lot of technical terms, and there's a lot of technical terms that Abel Calavaro uses in reference to how to put your fingers on the guitar and technique. However, very few people know this, but Abel Calavaro was the first person to really study this with Villa-Lobos. He defied Segovia and went and visited Heitor Villa-Lobos, and the two of them sat down while Villa-Lobos' friend played piano, and they went through some of the studies, not all of them, alright, and that's the key bit here, only some of them. I think he got between 6 and 8, I can't remember the exact amount, but he again got a manuscript version of it, so he is another source of information for originality and just diving under the surface of the pieces. What you get here is you get a load of little insights and studies to difficult sections. What you don't get here is a load of insights and studies into the really difficult sections, or even some of the odd fingerings, or help with the odd fingerings. But it is worth having. I mean, pretty much Abel Calavera is one of the best guitarists of his generation, and he was one of the ones that brought this set of studies out of the dark, as it were, where they lingered because Segovia didn't like the language. Three versions, starting with the first one. This is the one I recommend highly. Grab it. It's got all the fingering you need for the 12 etudes. It's got everything else besides, and it's got all the sources and a nice overview. It tells you why we have two different sources for the etudes, basically because it was printed in two different times, and then World War II broke out, and so we have a break between them. And because of that, the break is quite significant. Villa-Lobos reassessed everything in regards to the 12 etudes, which is why there is huge editorial changes between the 1928 manuscript and this, the 1951. If you haven't got money and you can't afford any of those editions, and trust me, I understand that, you need to get onto IMSLP, IMSLP, obviously dependent on which country you live in, whether you're allowed to, and there is a free copy of the 1928 manuscript. Now, I would suggest you get that anyway, because it's worthwhile having, because it's in Villa-Lobos' hand. You can see clearly what he meant, you can see how he worked everything out. So from a historical, musicological point of view, it's worth having a copy of it. It's now so easy to get. When I wanted a copy of it, I couldn't get one, and it was literally years later when I was back teaching at the Royal Welsh College that I asked John Mills for a copy, because up until that point you could not get it. You had to write to the museum in Brazil, I think it was, or you had to have a teacher that had a copy. So, much easier to get hold of, worth getting, 1928, and it's free. So there is a free option, and then there is the three other options. So, number one, definitely grab this one first. It's cheaper too than the others. If you have money to burn, this is worth having as a reference. I don't think that this is relevant anymore for the 12 etudes. For the 5 preludes, the Suite Brasiliana and Choice No. 1, definitely, you'll need it. Though there are other editions of that available as single pieces. Otherwise, the Frederick Zaganti edition has pretty much made this one obsolete. Don't get it, it's too expensive now anyway. And then, if you really got money to burn and you're interested, try and find this. These are very difficult to get hold of now because they're not being printed as much. But eBay and I think 8books, one of those, you'll be able to get your hands on them. This just gives you a little bit of extra insight into the pieces and some of the pieces. Obviously, Abel Calavera has done all 12, and he does. As a fantastic teacher, gives you loads of little studies for working extra things out and for just basically improving your technique. But the written descriptions are quite thick with technical language. Hopefully that helped. This is all part of the Villa-Lobos 12 and 12 challenge. We're kicking off January 2019 with Etude number 1. Here is a link to the sources if you want for Etude number 1, if you want to get ahead of the game. But come January, we're going to dive in. There also is a Facebook group which I've set up for my classical guitar sort of lessons. You can join that, and I'll be doing some live streams and stuff like that there with questions. Get joined. It's a community effort. It's not just me. I'm not just teaching. I want everybody in so that we use a hive mind to sort this out and learn the pieces, and more importantly, motivate each other to learn the pieces, because 12 months is a long time, and 12 of these etudes, as Leo Brau has just recently said, great music breaks your fingers. And he's right, it is great music, but it does break your fingers. So let's see if we can do it together.